John Milton, born in 1608 and died in 1674. John Milton towers over all his contemporaries like Terrific or Atlas unremoved. Paradise Lost is the greatest of English poems. Milton did invent a new diction for Paradise Lost, as Spenser did for the Fairy Queen, and for much the same reason he felt that the language of serious poetry had been vulgarized by popular writers like Qualls, that he must raise it to the height of his great argument, and since he had been writing Latin for years, to Latin he naturally turned. If this dissociation of sensibility means that thought and passion are not fused in Milton as they are, say, in the best of Dawn, the charge holds as against the theological parts of Paradise Lost, notably those speeches in which God the Father turns a school divine. But of the really great things in the poem, it is simply not true. Blake put it better. Milton wrote in fetters when he wrote of angels and God, and at liberty when of devils and hell. It is the chief structural flaw in Paradise Lost that the interest declines after the first two books, in which Milton wrote of devils and hell. His powerful poetry in Paradise Lost runs like this: to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering. It is better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. It is the chief structural flaw in Paradise Lost that the interest declines after the first two books, in which Milton wrote of devils and hell. His imagination impassioned and free to create, unfettered by the Bible story. Certainly, Milton had not Shakespeare's quick eye for movement, nor was he observant of near and little things. He seems always to gaze into the distance. This sense of distance, of space, was strangely heightened by his blindness. His prayer to celestial light shine inward, and the mind through all her powers irradiate was answered. Creation widened on his view. His inward vision surveyed the depths of interest, interstellar space, from Libra to the fleecy star that pierces Andromeda far off Atlantic seas. Milton is the supreme master of the material sublime. Even Dante's universe, compared to his, is no bigger than a star of a smallest magnitude close by the moon. Milton's ear may have been no finer than Shakespeare's by nature, but it was much more highly cultivated. His father was a composer of distinction. His home was full of music. Music was his lifelong solace, and no poet has written so movingly of its power to exalt and soothe, such as raised to heights of noblest temper heroes old, nor wanting power to mitigate and sways with Solomon touches troubled thoughts and chase, anguish and doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. His eye dwelling habitually on the distant, and his ear delighting most in orchestral harmonies, his verse assumed a corresponding amplitude, as in a rhyme he found a stanza too straight for Lycidas. Milton uses consonantal alliteration more artfully. Now and then we find a lovely vowel alliteration. The angel ended, and in Adam's ear, assonance of long vowels makes to save the Athenian walls from ruin bare. Perhaps the most beautiful line in the language. Considerations of sound then constantly dictated Milton's choice of words, but they did not deflect the current of his argument. It is not true that he never fuses sense impressions. Impressions of sight and smell are fused in the above passage and in the following passage also. Out at sea, northeast winds blow, Savian orders from the spicy shore of Araby the blessed. Fusion of sound and smell, rare in all poets, is exemplified in commerce. The freedom of the will is the keystone of Milton's creed. Milton held that God created all things not out of prima materia, as Dante held, but out of himself. He made matter and spirit, which is but a finer kind of matter. He made evil also. There was evil in heaven before Saturn rebelled. Pride, lust, ire, and avarice were there at the exaltation of the sun. These forces erupted and were cast forth. But God suffered them to escape from hell and infect the earth. And then the tragedy was reenacted, but with a difference. Man shall find grace, but he must lay hold of it by an act of free will. Paradise Lost will always be admired for its style, its verse, and its command of the material sublime, but it will not hold a place among the world's greatest poems unless men continue to find in its substance something of enduring and universal value. They will not find that in a theology which reveals no sense of the mystery of evil and makes God's command an arbitrary and man's redemption a legal transaction. They will find it, if at all, in the heroic temper of the poem, its unconquerable faith in reason and the power of the will. When Milton's Quaker friend Elwood handed him back the manuscript of Paradise Lost, he observed, "Thou hast said much here of Paradise Lost, but what hast thou to say of Paradise Found?" The question showed Milton that though he had said something of the redemption, he has not said enough for the friends whom he respected.